Hello and welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it may be for you, wherever you are, or whenever you're watching this webinar live with us right now or anytime in the future. We're so thankful that you've decided to join us for this webinar series, which we are playfully calling A Taste of SPI. And today's special guests will be Cheryl Wilson, Christine E. Krausdick, and Rachel F. Buller, who will be offering the course, The Art of Slow Leadership, at the 2026 Summer Peacebuilding Institute. And in a few moments, we will have Cheryl and Christine and Rachel joining us to share more about this course. So once again, thank you for joining us for this webinar today. This A Taste of SPI webinar series is designed to give you a preview of the Summer Peacebuilding Institute experience. These short and interactive sessions offer a chance to sample our courses, to meet the instructors, and to engage with the questions, practices, and approaches to learning that define SPI and that define this course, The Art of Slow Leadership. So whether you're joining us for the first time to explore what the SPI experience might be, or whether you're returning to join us and searching for what courses might be right for you this summer, we're thankful that you're spending this time with us today to learn more about this course. Before we get into inviting our special guests onto stage, I'm going to offer a short video. This video was captured from our 2025 Summer Peacebuilding Institute last summer, and it offers a bit of the feel, the vibe, the energy and essence of what it's like to be participating in the Summer Peacebuilding Institute here in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. So please sit back and enjoy. This video is about 3.5 minutes long, and then we'll return to your screen and start exploring this course a little bit further.
So to me, SPI is a place where people from all around the world can come together who are interested in learning and networking with each other to share stories and skills and to come together and learn about how to build peace in our communities, in ourselves, our families, and in systems of injustice.
It's just powerful. It is really powerful to be in a place where people ultimately share the same goal of a more just and peaceful world. That's a really powerful thing to be a part of.
When you come to SPI, if you're a practitioner, regardless of where you're from and regardless of sort of what your work includes, you feel like you're not alone. Participants will say, this is my place, this is my people, because people understand what I'm talking about. People understand me and I don't have to explain. And so this idea of, we don't share everything, we don't share a language even often, but when we're talking about conflict, we're talking about trying to make change happen in constructive ways and in positive ways.
Why I find SPI valuable is that I get to see multiple perspectives when I come here. I get to see people from other countries that I don't see in my normal life. And I also get to experience the curriculum of very, very different ways of dealing in the world, like the peace building, the conflict analysis, and have conversations that I don't have in my day-to-day life as a faculty member.
There aren't so many places where we get to really connect, reflect, get a little more honest with ourselves, maybe learn more from each other than we can in a typical academic or even a typical public kind of engagement situation.
There's a lot more to SPI than just the courses. First of all, it attracts really fantastic people who are looking to do good in the world and who are looking to build community.
Everybody you meet on the road of EMU, the Eastern Mennonite University, is so friendly. I tell you, this place reminds me of Africa. This place reminds me of my community. Eastern Mennonite University is a place that I have been able to bond with several people.
I experienced a tremendous sense of welcome, not just when I arrived, but throughout my time here. I felt like I was loved before I came here, that the space, that the courses, that the care materials were all prepared for me, for this learning community in a very intentional, loving way.
Don't miss out. You have to come. It is truly a unique place. It is an incubator, it is a networking space, and there's a lot that we learn and grow together here.
All right. I hope you enjoyed some of those perspectives from past participants and visuals of what it's like to be here at the Summer Peacebuilding Institute. So without further ado, I will welcome to the stage Cheryl and Christine and Rachel, who will be offering a course in session 3 at this year's Summer Peacebuilding Institute. Their course is The Art of Slow Leadership. I'm excited to hear more, to learn more about what that means, and to hear the conversation today. So Cheryl and Rachel and Christine, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us today. And I hand it over to you and eager to hear more.
Thanks so much, Corey. It's so inspiring to see that video and to know that we will get to be a part of that with all of you. We're going to shake up business as usual a little bit by introducing each other rather than introducing ourselves before we really get to kind of the meat of giving you an overview of slow leadership and what you can expect. And I get to start introductions with the inimitable Dr. Rachel Ep Buller. Rachel is an artist, a historian, an art historian, a professor of visual arts and design at Bethel College, and someone who has spent her career asking audiences to think differently, especially in terms of how they listen and what they pay attention to. Rachel holds a PhD in art history and an MFA in creative practice. She's the recipient of not one, but 2 Fulbright Scholar grants, and she's certified in deep listening. So she's really channeled all of this into groundbreaking work at the intersection of art, care, and leadership. She's a published author, a curator, an internationally exhibited artist, and perhaps most impressive, she's the mother of 3 almost adults, and we're so lucky to have her on the Slow Leadership team. Cheryl, what would you add about Rachel?
So Rachel, it's no mystery to me why Rachel is a practitioner in deep listening. She's a quiet person in general, but Rachel is extremely observant and often is the one who, in a lot of ways, is into the details, into the minutia of how we do our work as a team. And so for Rachel, that is her superpower. One of the other things that I find to be amazing, this highly accomplished woman, artist, in the ways that I have, in the time that I have known Rachel. It's amazing how she gets so much done in the way of her writing and the way of the exhibits that she has carefully put out over the years. Just beautiful creative work, and she's just so quiet about it, and yet she's like a duck. She's paddling under under the water. She's always got something going. I love that about you, Rachel.
Thank you, Cheryl. Wasn't sure where you were going with that.
So, all right. Well, shall we talk about Christine now?
Yes, let's do it.
Yes. So, I am going to, Rachel, leave you with some of the high end things about Christine in terms of her educational background and her work life, because I like just talking about Christine in the way that I know Christine. And a lot of the things that Christine has helped me with have to do with the fact that she is a gifted vocabularian. If you need a word, Christine has it, or she will find it. And also, she is an amazing connector of people and very in tune to ask the right questions at the right in community. So I appreciate that about you, Christine. And I'm going to hand it over to our dear friend Rachel to fill out the other things in your background.
Yeah, of course. So yes, I'll give the higher level overview about Dr. Christine Kraus-Dick. She has a master's and a PhD in communication studies. So she studies and teaches communication, media, and more recently leadership as well, especially relational leadership. She is professor of communication arts and the chair of the communication arts department at Bethel College. She has been a leader on the Bethel College campus for many years. I really enjoyed having her as the chair of our division, where she was such a thoughtful leader in the ways that she curated spaces, began and ended meetings, just gave a lot of thought to the ways she was bringing people together. She is also a coach, a consultant, a facilitator for organizations, both in the area and farther afield, so much sought after speaker. And she is the mother of a gorgeous, charming 12-year-old boy. So yes, really pleased to be in this project with her, working together. And then I will just transition to introducing you to Cheryl Wilson, who I'm also very excited to have the chance to work with. I got to know Cheryl, 5-6 years ago when she came to this area as the executive director of the Kansas Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. She has more recently transitioned to a position as the vice president for culture and belonging at Bethel College. She has a Master of Liberal Studies from the University of Minnesota and is currently working on a Doctor of Educational Leadership and Policy. She is a restorative justice practitioner, educator, trainer, facilitator, also much sought after speaker. And she, as she says, she is the mother of 2, wife of 1.
Yeah. So a few things about Cheryl. So I want to go back to her current title, Vice President of Culture and Belonging at Bethel College. If that title doesn't stop you in your tracks, it should. Cheryl is literally responsible for guiding and preserving the soul of an institution. And when you get to know Cheryl, you'll see that this makes perfect sense. She's spent decades doing the hard, slow, relational work of repair in courtrooms, in communities, in classrooms, and in the halls of higher education. She's sat with victims and offenders of violent crime. She's facilitated healing in some of the most difficult circumstances imaginable, and she's trained practitioners across the country to do the same. I think, though, for me, what makes Cheryl truly remarkable is the way that she meets people exactly where they are. She sees the value in every person in the room, regardless of where they are at in their journey. And she has this gift of helping people see themselves as precious, as valuable, and yet still capable of change and growth. So we're going to transition now to help you think about some of the kinds of situations that slow leadership, what you're here to learn about or get a taste of, that slow leadership might help you navigate. And Rachel is going to help us kick that off by putting a question in the chat to prompt some thought. So Rachel?
Yeah, so I'll speak this question aloud. I will also put it in the chat where you can respond. And the question is this: what is a difficult trait that you have experienced in a leader, whether that person was your supervisor at work or a leader in a volunteer or other kind of community organization? So I will put this in the chat right now for everybody to see. And we'll just take a couple of minutes to see what kinds of responses anybody on the call might have. And we can also talk through some scenarios that we also bring to the table, since we have all worked with people who, might have had a leadership style that was not the same as our own, and that proved challenging in a variety of ways.
I think, Rachel, one thing that comes to mind for me when I think about some challenging traits is leaders who have a very kind of defensive, my way or the highway approach to leadership that doesn't leave space for listening or ideas or insights.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes even questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think about people that might have led that I've encountered where there's a misalignment of personal or organizational goals, when we don't necessarily see eye to eye or have like a framework where we're all operating off of the same page.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think too, passive aggressive behavior may be a shame-based approach to leadership. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have a few in the chat, looks like.
I'll just read this out for anyone who can't see it. A few difficult traits I have noticed: big egos, failure to follow through on commitments, and inability to hear different perspectives. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good jumping off place for us to think about what slow leadership might bring to you as you might think about envisioning a different way of leading. So what is slow leadership? We hope to and plan to spend our SPI week together defining that in multiple ways and on multiple levels. But in a nutshell, slow leadership is something that we describe as an alternative to forceful, autocratic, anxiety-driven models of leadership that are really deeply ingrained in most of our institutions. This approach that we've developed intentionally departs from hierarchical, control-oriented approaches to leadership that really prize efficiency over human connection. So slow leadership offers something different, a framework that is centered on compassion, on equity, and on meaningful dialogue. And that name, slow leadership, really connects us to a broader sort of transdisciplinary conversation about the notion of slow. One scholar puts it this way. They say slow is not really about time or pacing. It's about connection. And that relational priority is at the heart of everything that we do within this framework. So slow leadership is rooted in scholarship that draws on restorative and social justice traditions and practices. It challenges Western, colonial, and capitalist assumptions about what leadership is supposed to look like who leads, how do they lead, whose voices get centered in that process. And because this is an interdisciplinary collaboration between Cheryl, Rachel, and me, and you, and what you will bring, we bring different strengths and research areas to slow leadership. So we'll take a few minutes here to share briefly about how some of the areas that we come to slow leadership with in terms of our educational and professional experience, how those connect to what you'll learn about at SPI. So Cheryl, would you want to start us off with the slow leadership approach to circle process?
Yes, let me talk about that. So one of the places where slow leadership becomes very tangible in practice is through the application of circle process. In my own work, I often bring people together who are connected through a shared organization or a role. Sometimes they are departments within an institution. Sometimes they're teams that work alongside one another, but rarely have the opportunity to sit in the same space and truly talk about how things are going. What happens is these groups will come together because there's some type of challenge they want to address. There may be a tension that's surfaced. Or a pattern that needs attention, or an organizational moment where people realize something's not working the way it should work. And so in those moments, I invite them into what we know now is a slow leadership circle process. And the first thing that happens is something quite simple but very profound. We pause. So instead of moving immediately to problem solving, and which is the way a lot of organizations do, where people do things to the exclusion of others and move quickly toward a decision, the circle allows everyone to step in the same shared space. So within that process, participants are invited to name their roles, reflect on what they've observed, and acknowledge where there may have been disconnects, misunderstandings, or even harm. Because the structure of the circle ensures that every person has an opportunity to speak and listen, the conversation unfolds differently from what many people are accustomed to seeing. What I've found is that people often report afterward that they have a deep appreciation for the chance to slow down together. Many of them say, for many of these organizations, they'll say it's the first time they've had the opportunity to hear the full range of perspectives around an issue all in one place. What is particularly striking is how many participants describe this experience as a kind of an organizational or structural reckoning. Being in the circle becomes that moment of recognition. People began to see how their usual ways of working, the speed of decision making, the separation between groups, the unspoken assumptions may have contributed to the very challenges they're trying to address. Because the circle process slows everything down, it creates the rare opportunity for collective reflection. And in that reflection, groups often reach a moment where they recognize they have an opportunity to do something differently moving forward. So some participants have even described this experience as a turning point. There's the ways that they had the old ways of operating, and then they have the hope and the possibility of a new approach to working together. That is one of the reasons why I see circle process as the powerful vehicle of slow leadership. It offers leaders and teams a structured way to get up, to step out of urgency, listen across differences, and um, an approach problem solving in a way that's more thoughtful, more relational, and more collective. And one of the ways that that happens is we use very curated prompts that allow for the process to be a little different than your average circle process. So, in that sense, a slow leadership process does more than facilitate a conversation. It creates a space where leadership, problem solving, and community building can happen together rather than separately. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to continue talking about deep listening.
Thank you, Cheryl. Well, as Christine alluded to in her very generous introduction of me, part of what I bring to slow leadership is my creative background, an interest in creative problem solving, and in imagining how we could do things differently. One creative person whose work informs the way I approach this thinking is Pauline Oliveros, who was an experimental musician who developed a pedagogy that she called deep listening. In our week together, we'll learn more about her and her work and engage with her practice, but just to give you a quick glimpse of what that means. Deep listening is a practice of trying what she said was to listen all the time and in as many ways as possible. Something she often told her students was remember to listen. When we cultivate better listening abilities, we will notice things, pay better attention, even become in tune with those around us. There are different ways of engaging with deep listening. Some of the exercises involve being quiet and focusing on a particular listening question, almost like a meditation. Others are more like spoken word activities. Still others involve making sounds in a group to bring together both sounding and listening, which is of course what musicians do all the time, but people in conversation do that as well. When I think about what we're developing for a practice of slow leadership, what speaks to me in part from Pauline Oliveros' work is that she envisions such an expansive conception of listening with and through our bodies and minds, listening all the time as a way to become better in tune with other people and our environments around us. Slow leaders need to engage with and listen with their bodies. Notice what feelings you're getting from a situation. Pay attention to what your body is telling you when you walk into a room, when you feel tension in a space, or when you notice certain body language or tones of voice. This, for me, also has to do with advocating for justice, noticing who is listening and how, who is speaking, who is not, who's being listened to, and who is not, and noticing who is and is not included in a given conversation. As slow leaders, if we can attune ourselves to noticing these patterns of behavior and communication, then we'll be in a position where we can begin to make changes, flatten the hierarchy, and create situations to engage differently, more inclusively, more equitably. It's not just your ears that will help you manage situations. We can use our bodies and our senses to listen more effectively to those around us and to figure out what's going on so that we can help everyone navigate paths forward. Christine, do you want to tell us about your special area of emphasis for slow leadership?
Sure. So my background is communication studies, and over the years, I've studied and taught about various facets of communication, but in particular, persuasion and public and interpersonal communication. In leadership studies, we spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about how leaders show up for and motivate others, how to listen, how to support, how to build community, and all of that matters a lot. But one thing that we keep coming back to in our slow leadership research and practice is this: you cannot pour from an empty cup. And let's be honest, a lot of cups are running pretty dry right now across the world for a variety of reasons. One facet of slow leadership that we found especially transformative, especially cup filling, is the concept of self-compassion. Now, self-compassion is not about letting yourself off the hook or about lowering your standards. Social psychologist Kristen Neff, whose scholarship grounds this part of our framework, she described self-compassion as meeting yourself with the same untainted and supportive kindness that you would extend to a good friend or a child who's going through a hard time. So for leaders who are working in environments that prize constant productivity, forward momentum, this can be a really radical act because our institutions often run on an internalized logic of more output, less rest, no weakness. And slow leadership, guided by self-compassion, pushes back on that. It says well-being matters, and that has to include your own. But there's another dimension here. When leaders practice self-compassion, they create space and permission for others to do the same. It shifts the culture of entire rooms, of entire departments, of entire institutions. And this is research bound, these claims that I'm making here. Research shows that when leaders model self-compassion, when they acknowledge difficulty, when they own their mistakes, and when they resist the performance of stoic perfectionism, they signal to the people around them that it's safe to be human. And this can shift a culture. It can create conditions for more honest dialogue, for more creative problem solving, and for more sustainable, longer term ways of working together. So in an era of enormous pressure, right? Financial, political, relational, we need leaders who can stay present and who can stay grounded without burning out or shutting down. So self-compassion isn't just a soft skill add-on to that kind of leadership. It really sets a tone for doing the hard work that is required of leadership. Cheryl, I think you're going to tell us a little bit about what we can expect and what people might leave the course with. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right.
So, in the course of the week, here are some of the things that we'll be doing together. So first of all, which is probably not a mystery to any of you, because if you are familiar with SPI, you know this is going to be a highly interactive course. So you're not going to come to sit and get. We're going to question what you have already learned or seen about different leadership styles. And then we're going to talk about mindfulness practices. So connected to what Christine said about self-compassion, mindfulness is a way, it's an expression of self-compassion. And we're going to engage in the self-work that is necessary to be a slow leader. That's going to be a starting point for us. And then you're going to develop an understanding of deep listening. So you'll get, some of that experience that Rachel has about deep listening. You're going to have an opportunity to take some lessons from that. And then we're going to look at how we practice slow leadership strategies and learn how to use the slow leadership prompts. And all of that builds to having the opportunity to facilitate a slow leadership circle process. So we want those that are attending to have an opportunity to do that. And we're not just going to, again, show you by what we do, but we want you to have that experience as well. So those are some of the things that you will get from coming to our course. So I will pass it on. And we're kind of near the end of our time of talking about this. And so we're at a point where we want to take some questions from you as our audience. So let's see where we're at.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for
I was
all
just
that you
wondering if Corey was going to come back on stage with us.
Yes.
surprise.
Hi.
So yeah, for any of those folks who are with us live, and as you might have any questions, please enter them in the comment section. We'll be happy to answer them.
Yes.
And I have a question, which is about what previous experience, either with circle process or in leadership roles or in any capacity, is necessary before joining this course, if anything.
Good
That is
question.
a great question. So I think we are expecting people to come in with all kinds of experiential knowledge. Everyone has worked with leaders in all kinds of settings, but there is no leadership experience necessary, no circle process experience necessary to join the course. There's no prerequisites.
Mm-hmm. Good question in that. Just thinking about one of the things that we say in our writing is that leadership can come from anyone in the room. Mm-hmm. And so we really walk that talk. We recognize the fact that some people may come and they may not be, maybe it's someone who I'm thinking about a stay-at-home mom. I'm thinking about somebody who might not be in the traditional boxes that we want to put people in as quote unquote leaders. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I think wonderful. And especially people, so right, this is really helpful for those who find themselves in leadership positions, for those who want to be in leadership positions, for those who are curators of spaces, maybe behind the scenes, right, who may be more supportive to leaders. But a big point to tag on to what Cheryl has said is part of the approach of slow leadership is really kind of rethinking what leader means and what leadership means. And there's an invitation to sort of flatten the hierarchy of importance, of self-importance often that helps, that gets infused within us when we are given or when we come into leadership positions, and recognize that we don't have a corner on all areas and aspects of the truth or definitions of that. And so inviting others to engage in that. So really it is for anyone.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm also curious if any of you have a experience that comes to mind when you think of offering this framework in a space where maybe the rest of the folks in the room were used to a more hierarchical or traditional leadership. What have any of you noticed by not only teaching this framework, but enacting it? Have you noticed shifts or responses from people? Is there any interesting reflection or story that comes to mind when you think about that?
Yeah, maybe while Cheryl and Rachel are thinking, I'll just kind of say in a more global, macro kind of a way, some things that I have noticed is that at first it's, I think, uncomfortable because we're asking folks to think a little bit differently or a lot differently, right? And so it's living into and leaning into the permission to think about leading differently, or to think about critiquing leadership and how it unfolds in a different way too. And yet, once we start to practice, you can start to see, so Cheryl mentioned the word pause, and you'll hear Rachel say that a lot too in her discussion of deep listening. But pauses seem to become so much more comfortable. Comfort with discomfort. People become much more grounded. I see. So it really is transformational on a personal and collective level.
Well, just one thing I would add to that, Christine, is I know you, just to think about who's in the room, I know you've also had really successful experiences using some of this slow leadership framework in your own classes with your undergraduate students, and shifting the ways that using a circle can be different in a classroom setting than the professor at the front and everybody else facing, and just, you know, the give and receive, the more passive acceptance of information, that, you know, to participate in a circle just offers all kinds of opportunities for connection, for better understanding of who's in the room with you and why are they acting that way, and, you know, you just learn about people differently.
And having the space and time, excuse me, sorry, Cheryl, but having the space and time to get to the heart of, oh, well, that's why, not the narrative that I had created in my head.
Yeah.
I remember even having a situation as a manager, as a person who was having a one-on-one with one of the people that reported to me. I was caught up in the throes of the busyness of everything. And I remember her looking at me and she said, wait a minute, this is counter to what you have been writing about. The way I just jumped into that, you know, way of doing things where it was to her exclusion and she wasn't a part of my process. And I so appreciated her calling me on my stuff, because it's not Christine, Rachel, and I just had a conversation about perfection being the enemy of the good. We are not perfect at this, but the thing that is so great is that it resonates so well that, again, the leadership came not from the slow leader, the curator of slow leadership, whatever. It was coming from someone who could actually help me to do better in my own leadership style. So I welcome the fact that Christine mentioned how we will learn from the people that attend. We very much mean that. So we look at it as in some ways as an experience where it will be a symbiotic relationship with the people that attend.
Cheryl, I'm thinking about you talking about being called out by someone who knew about the research and scholarship and writing that you were doing. I've shared with Rachel and Cheryl about this several times, but my 12-year-old, when we were first starting to develop this, he could tell when I was researching and writing and working on this. He could tell based upon how I was treating him and how I was working with him. And at one point in time, he said, I think you need to get back into that stuff that you're talking about with Cheryl and Rachel, because I could sure use a little bit more of that right now from you.
It makes me think of slow leadership not only as a tool or a way of being together in group or in community, but as something that also resists some of the structures we're caught up within when we're trying to perpetuate getting things done or moving at a certain pace or overwhelming and overloading ourselves. And that's not going to allow us to live up to the values that we are.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what you're recognizing there is just like, no matter what, right? It's still within us, and still we're constantly kind of like needing these reminders. And that's what our prompts are about in our prompt deck that we'll be sharing with folks to help with that.
I'm looking at the chat, and I see we have someone who has put in a comment question. I guess it's posing, really just asking for some input about slow leadership on the community level, and how we might talk about that. And I guess I can kick us off in that conversation by saying, when we are faced with, it's one thing when you have people who are in an organization and everybody's there for a shared vision of whatever the output is of that organization. But when you come together as community, you really are in that situation where you have people coming from all different channels, walks of life, the diversity of people who may enter a situation. And so I really welcome the challenge of working with people who do community work, and inviting them to think in terms of casting the widest net possible to include everyone who is representative of the community. And that takes time. And for some, there's always this need to rush toward a decision. As I said about circle process earlier, there's a need to just cut to the chase, especially when we don't know each other. And so in community, part of that slowing down is taking the time to really find out who's in the room and how we can develop relationships with each other first before we start to tackle any issues that bring people together. So I'll stop there.
Thanks for that groundwork in answering that question. And thanks for that question, Marion. I also would say too, something that comes out of slow leadership is a different approach to the notions of failure as well as success. So slowing down can really help us to see the value of connecting along the road rather than within this 50-minute time period needing to get to the answer that ends all other answers. That doesn't mean that we're not working toward outcomes, goals and objectives and outcomes, but it does mean that we're seeing the wins along the way. And some of those wins are knowing that we're better understanding each other, what each other needs, and whether or not we are impediments to getting those met, or if we're agents of assistance and help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that question from the chat. And thank you again so much, Cheryl and Christine and Rachel, for spending some time with us today and offering this insight into slow leadership and what more might be offered or might come this summer. So I'll invite folks who are with us now or who are watching in the future who are perhaps interested in joining us this summer. There is a QR code that's coming onto your screen now, which you are welcome to scan, and that will take you to our Summer Peacebuilding Institute website, where you can read more about Cheryl and Christine and Rachel, or about this course. And you can explore all sorts of questions that you might have about the Summer Peacebuilding Institutes. If you have questions that come up at any point which aren't answered there, you're also welcome to email us at spi@emu.edu. Get in touch and we'll be happy to answer more questions about slow leadership or anything related to the Summer Peacebuilding Institutes. So we have, from this day that we're airing this, a few months until this launches. This course will be from June 8th to 12th. And those few months are going to go really quickly. So if you are interested, please do reserve your spot and be with us this summer. Yeah. All right. Once again, Cheryl, Christine, Rachel, thank you. It's been wonderful to see you today. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.